So we have to take so we look formal.
Well, good evening, and welcome to the University of St. Thomas Opus College of Business. My name is Mark Spriggs, and I'm the director of the Schultz School of Entrepreneurship here, and I am honored to host this evening event on intersections in innovation. Tonight's event is the fourth in our Intersection series, a series designed to bring thought leaders in higher education and proficient practitioners in the business community together to discuss topics that impact everyone. Before I introduce our guests, I want to take care of some housekeeping. First, be sure any ringers or reminders on your mobile devices are turned off. Or to paraphrase the Queen of Hearts from Alice in Wonderland, if your ringer goes off, so does your head. For those of you interested in tweeting tonight, the hashtag for this event is UST Intersections. When you checked in this evening, you were provided with a blank card. If you didn't get a blank card, there are some on the rail here behind the first section of seating. Please use it to write a question for either or both of our guests that you would like them to address. A few of our MBA students, volunteers, will come around and pick those up. I think the easiest thing to do would be if you write one of those, just sort of hand it down to the end of the aisle. People that are there that could set them up there, and we'll pick them up on a periodic basis. And I'll also remind you, and you can do that. It doesn't have to come right now. We can do it later as well. All right. And now it is my honor to introduce our guest panelists. Dr. Laura Dunham. I think you'll probably figure out which one is which as I introduce them. Dr. Dunham is an associate professor at the Schultz School of Entrepreneurship. Joined the faculty here in 2003. She teaches entrepreneurship and corporate innovation courses at the undergraduate and graduate levels, as well as in our executive development programs. Her research focuses on the managerial and ethical challenges involved in innovation and new business startup and development. Prior to her doctoral studies, Dr. Dunham worked as a management consultant in the strategy division of Renaissance Worldwide, helping clients such as Oracle, IBM, Lucent Technologies, and GTE identify, evaluate, and develop new global initiatives. Jeff Lavers is the 3M's Vice President of Sales, Global Sales, Marketing, and Communications. He oversees 3M's worldwide branding, corporate marketing, sales, 3M.com, and communications efforts. Most recently, Mr. Lavers has championed and led the reinvigoration. Thank you, reinvigoration of. It's a good thing I'm not the speaker tonight. I'm going to sit down in a minute, then I'll be done. I thought if I snuck up on it, no. The 3M brand, resulting in the company being recognized among Interbrand's top 100 brands and named second among the best global green brands in 2011. During more than 20 years at 3M, Mr. Lavers has worked in 3M's oral care business at various positions in sales, marketing, and general international management. He served as the global director of marketing for 3M SB Dental Products during the acquisition of Germany's SB Dental AG and has held 2 vice president and general manager positions within 3M's industrial and transportation business. So welcome to you both.
Thank you.
The format for this evening is to eavesdrop on a conversation between Laura and Jeff as they talk about their experiences and knowledge of innovation, and then a bit later we can jump into that conversation with questions from you. So if you have any other questions you would like them to answer, please fill out one of those cards and we'd be glad to feed those to them and have them discuss what you're interested in as well. Okay? So I'll begin the evening with a question, and that is, Laura and Jeff, how do you define business innovation?
Go ahead.
Okay. Well, I think from a research and academic standpoint, one definition of innovation is that it is about applying creativity to finding a new match between a need and a solution. So the creativity can be around developing some new insights about customer needs that we haven't filled in the past before, or it can be around clever and solutions that actually meet those needs in very new ways and that delight our customers. So needs and solutions and bringing some creative, novel thinking to those is how we tend to think about innovation.
I think it's a great question, Mark. And first of all, let me thank you for your term of a practitioner within this. I've never been referred to that before, so I appreciate that. That's nice. I'll add that to my resume. But I think with regards to innovation, I'll add to the creativity and some other components with a few other C's. Our view is we're looking for people who are curious. We love people who ask why. We love even more people who ask questions, why not? I think that's very important in terms of anything we do with innovation. We're looking for people who are courageous. They're risk takers. They want to make sure that they're champions for what their project is. And we're looking for people who have some colorfulness. And when I say colorfulness, there's a roundedness in terms of their approach. They love to collaborate. They love to interject themselves with others. They seek constantly advice, opinions in other areas. And part of the culture we really foster within our company is just that. Really, I think, trying to get people together, making sure people are asking a lot of questions, and then when you're stumped, reach out to somebody else who may be able to solve a problem for you.
And I love that, the 3 C's. I think that's an excellent way to think about the kinds of people who are great at innovation. And one of the things I tell my class about, and that I took from a company called IDEO, which is quite famous for its skills and processes around innovating, is David Kelly, the founder there, said that in order to find really great innovators, we look for what we call T-shaped people. So have you heard that?
Yeah, he was just speaking at our building last week. So.
Oh, wow. That would have been an interesting conversation.
Yeah.
So T-shaped people are people who clearly have really, the vertical axis is their deep expertise in some kind of functional area. But the horizontal axis is that they are people who are broadly curious, intellectually curious, interested in a lot of different things, people who like to travel and experience new things. And I think that's such a fascinating sort of insight, because I think in business we have a tendency when we're bringing people into an organization to focus very much on that functional expertise. Does this person have the right experience? Do they have the right skill set? And we forget about thinking about those other characteristics of open-mindedness and flexibility and curiosity. So I love this metaphor of the T-shaped person. Let me ask you a question. If, in fact, we're looking for people who bring more than just functional skills and expertise, and we're trying to find those people that have those broad interests, how do you go about finding those people and recruiting them? How do you know that they're going to bring that kind of mindset and approach?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think first and foremost, it's about how you articulate who you are as a company, as a culture. And what you're trying to do is make sure the people that we're recruiting from universities all around the world, that they have a firm understanding of who we are, that they, more than us looking for them, they're looking for us. And we feel it's that intersection of we're going to be able to meet their needs, they're going to be able to meet our needs within that. And I think in order for us to do that, it's a lot of dialogue, both in terms of a lot of the promotional work we do outbound, but also just a common understanding of who we are as a company within that. It's really vital for us to share information. Within our company, we have 10,000 people in our research and development facilities around the world. We have over 80 labs in 36 countries. And one thing all of our scientists around the world have in common is they collaborate, and they collaborate like crazy. Because in order for you to advance your career with us in the fields of sciences, invention is not enough. You have to be able to be a teacher. You have to be able to be a person who's enthusiastically sharing your ideas. And when we have those combinations, this is what really sparks the ideas. Because generally what we find is the ideas that somebody brings in originally ultimately succeed by having collaboration of 2 or 3 other individuals that really crystallize it into a really breakthrough moment.
And I think from an academic standpoint, we also find that collaboration is really critical, right? That nobody has the one answer. You got to bring a lot of different perspectives, a lot of different information together. I think collaboration is an increasingly challenging thing as companies grow. So what kinds of mechanisms or processes do you guys put in place to keep that information flowing?
Yeah, that's a great question. We are constantly being asked by other companies. You know, we've had this culture of collaboration in for 100 years. So the first question we always tell people is, if you really want to develop a collaborative culture, go back 100 years, start, and then, you know, see where it manifests itself now. But all kidding aside, I think it starts with tone from the top. You have to be able to have leaders who say, this is how it's going to be. We're going to continuously push this through the organization, and we're going to squash on behaviors and attitudes and metrics and processes that are going to limit that. In our laboratories, we have 40 different business units, each with their own laboratories as well as large corporate laboratories. What we try to stress to everyone is the technology doesn't belong to anyone. It actually belongs to everyone. So while somebody may be working on a specific technology in one particular business, I can be in a different business and I have full access to that technology for my needs. And that's the way it has to work. A lot of times what happens in companies is they'll try to figure out a way, well, how do I pay for that? How do I put that in my P&L? How do I recharge for that? And when you get into that mindset, you're losing the spirit of what's really important with that. And it's vital that that happens.
So how do you overcome that, though? I mean, you know, in terms of how do you create the kinds of rewards and incentives and, you know, recognition or compensation systems that allow people to collaborate even, you know, without worrying about those kinds of issues?
Well, again, it's how you set up your recognition processes. It's how you set up your ability to compensate people. It's how you recognize how people advance in a company. And it's all based on the attributes you're looking for that stimulate the type of collaboration we're looking for. We have lots of people who have hundreds of patents to their name. And they recognize they love to invent, but they're not very good in terms of sharing. And so what happens is they invent, but they sort of plateau to some degree within the ability for them to grow within their careers, and they understand it. While we have other people who maybe don't necessarily invent themselves so much, but they invent in a very collaborative fashion, and they're excellent teachers, and they're wonderful in terms of sharing their ideas. And we do, in our company, we do over 800 events a year around the world where we just have scientists together talking about ideas. Poster sessions, video chats, hallway conversations are all included in that perspective. And it's really important to have that fostering environment within that.
Yeah, for sure. And I think one of the interesting trends that we're noticing and that recently a lot of research has been focused on is this notion of open innovation. So 3M has always been fantastic at figuring out how to foster that collaboration across a worldwide organization and despite all these different business units. But what we're definitely seeing is greater interest in businesses have recognized that, you know, great insights about customers, great insights about terrific solutions is really widely distributed. It doesn't necessarily just come from the technologists, the R&D, or even our product development people. I mean, increasingly companies are saying, wow, there's a lot of stuff happening, number one, among frontline employees and managers that aren't necessarily usually part of that innovation or new product development process or conversation. There's a lot of interesting things happening in terms of co-creating with customers. You know, I think a great example is Nike's ID shoes, where you can actually design your own shoe. You know, and of course, tons of internet, value propositions are all about how you can customize the users are helping customize the experience. But you know, also great ideas sometimes happen in university labs, sometimes they happen in startup companies on the other side of the world.
Oh yeah.
You know, so companies are really wrestling with how do we, you know, break down the walls of our organization and think smartly, strategically, efficiently about how we tap into all this distributed expertise. And I'm curious what 3M is getting involved in that regard.
Well, Laura, that's a great question. You know, I think it starts with, first of all, innovation should not be ever owned by a function. It shouldn't be an R&D function. It shouldn't be a marketing function. It shouldn't be within that. It should be widely held that everybody plays a role within this. And I think it's very important for everyone in an organization to understand I do play a role. I may not be inventing, but that doesn't mean I can't be innovative. As a matter of fact, some of the great breakthroughs you're seeing now have little to do with invention and more to do with process creation. New business models, a lot of different areas we're seeing within this. You know, the whole field of patents that's emerging now on processes versus products or technologies within that, it's staggering. It's tremendous. I think it's really the great breakthroughs moving forward. In our organization, we really try to do it through, we're a process-driven organization. We've been doing Lean Six Sigma for years, but you have to understand that innovation is, of its very nature, a disruptive component. So it's very hard to put a process around something that is inherently disruptive. But one of the things we try to do, we have, like any large company, we're littered with acronyms. I mean, the very essence of our name, 3M, is an acronym, Minnesota Mining and Manufacturing. So we literally have a manual of acronyms that you have to memorize on your third day of employment, or you literally can't work there anymore. But all kidding aside, we have this one process which we call the HOT process. Okay, so just to clue you in on how acronyms work in big teams, HOT stands for Huge Opportunity Team. So a lot of thought that was creative marketing, by the way, in case you didn't pick up on that. But our Huge Opportunity Team, basically what we do is we take people from our laboratories and we take people from our marketing organizations and we embed them in a customer's facility for 6 weeks. And they just watch. They observe. They take copious notes. They pay attention to what's happening. Because 9 times out of 10, it's the unarticulated needs that really are the true breakthroughs. And so what we do then is we have those teams come back in and we start to share. What did you see? What did you learn? What did that mean? And some of the biggest breakthroughs we've had in these businesses that deploy this were products we were able to develop from this process. And it's inspiring to see the collaboration cross-functionally within this because people look at it from different views. You know, someone may have a high IQ and see it one way. Somebody may have a high EQ and see it another way. But when you get them in the same room talking to each other, it's magic. And we call it customer-inspired innovation. And it's truly, I think, instrumental in terms of really addressing long-term solutions.
I think one of the interesting challenges facing a lot of companies, I mean, research shows that most companies think they do a pretty good job generating ideas, actually. You know, in terms of getting teams. And I would probably dispute that because I think it is really hard actually to get good ideas. And even when I work with executives and companies who feel like they've got lots of ideas, if you look at the ideas going into their pipeline, they're kind of similar to ideas they've always had going into their pipeline. And clearly as innovators, we want to figure out how you get a diversity of ideas that are really bringing some breakthrough thinking to the customer. So I do think that's challenging. But I definitely, the research overlaps is what happens next, you know, in terms of, I think even business managers say, what's really scary is once we have all these ideas and we're trying to put them through a pipeline, it's very hard to get anything out the other end that doesn't look like everything else we've done, right? Because we have these processes for evaluating and screening and resourcing ideas that, number one, demand a lot of data up front. You know, you've got to put together the business case, who's the customer, how big is the market. You've got to be able to put numbers. You know, today, based on this very initial preliminary concept, how big is it going to get? What kind of return on investment can we get? We're going to compare that against other, you know, forecasts of other opportunities. But before we can even proceed. But if you're talking about something that's really radically new, something that's new to the market, something that's what we would sort of call Horizon 3, you know, further out there, there's no information. There's a lot of uncertainty. And so those tend to get no from the very start. So it's very hard for most corporations to actually pursue things that go beyond just sort of continuing to exploit the core. So my question is, what kinds of processes do you guys have, and do you guys train your teams with hot teams that are doing something really big and really out of the ordinary in terms of their next steps? Once you have the idea, what do they do in order to get it approved for further funding, and how do they develop the idea so that it in fact can continue to be something that's a hot, big, different idea and not just more of the same? Yeah,
you know, I would go back, and if I look across, you know, we're a company that introduces 1,200 new products a year. That's 20 a week, all right? So you better have a process in place in order to be able to handle that kind of a output load. So the really revolutionary products we have all share a couple of things in common. We've done some studying on this. First and foremost, they have a champion. They have an evangelist who's standing behind that product. And it doesn't matter if that person's from the lab, or that person's from manufacturing, or that person may be from sales, or they could be from any function. But there's an evangelist somewhere. They absolutely believe this thing is going to be phenomenal. It's going to solve problems. It's going to make things happen. And they actively work the organization to make sure everybody appreciates and understands what it is. You have to have that if you're going to be successful with any product coming through a process within that. I think the second thing we look at is, when we saw these commonalities, is we have an acute understanding of what the market need is because we've involved the customer early in the process. So generally what we try to find in a lot of our marketplaces is what we call a thought leader or opinion leader or some type of an early savant who can help us understand what the market needs are. In every industry, every market has these. The key is identifying early who they are, and you have to invite them in the process. And for a company like ours, which holds intellectual property closer to our chest than anybody you've arguably ever met, and I'd like to remind people the tallest building on our campus is where the lawyers are. There's a lot of them. But I think you have to take that risk. You have to engage that customer in the process. And what it does is it gives assuredness to the rest of the organization that you're on track. I've had tons of marketers. I used to be one in this case, where I would just talk ad nauseum about I got all this data and different things. But if you have a customer who's really the person helping drive that, it carries a lot more gravitas in an organization.
So in terms of the traditional kind of approach to new product development, which is sort of a stage gate process that begins with a lot of data and an NPV analysis and predicted return on investment. For your hot big groups, do they have to go through something like that?
Oh, absolutely. Everybody does.
And what if it's what if it is so radically different that we're not really quite sure how it's going to develop yet in terms of who the customers might be and what the value proposition is going to be, and therefore what the technology needs to be, and
right.
What do you do with those that are just so early stage, but there's this sense that this could be really big, but I don't have any data yet because right now we don't serve that market, we don't have that technology. Yeah. In fact, you could arguably say there is no market out there yet for a product like
right.
this. How do you?
Yeah, that's a great question. You see this all the time with what you do with entrepreneurs too. It's the constant battle for how do I get resources to support what my initiative is. I think I would pull out a product that's now over 30 years old as an illustrator, and that's our Post-it notes. Very, very well-known product. I'm sure everybody here uses tons of them every day. But with Post-it notes, and again, it goes back to my comment on the champion. That product was killed 6 times. Literally said, we're not going to do this. We couldn't really find a market. We couldn't make a determination. And ultimately, what was the breakthrough with that market, and we talk a lot about the technologies, and trust me, Post-it notes, as simple as it sounds, there is amazing technology behind that. And there's a reason a lot of other people can't make them, is because it's really hard to make. But the breakthrough in that theme actually came through a very savvy marketer who decided to do some sampling with administrative assistants in senior level offices and gave them to them and found out how to use them. And suddenly the positioning we had always taken with the product was totally flipped in reverse to now what it is. Really where it becomes an office organizer, a simplifier of information flow, an opportunity for you to capture your thoughts, an opportunity for you to share information. That was not the original target with that. And subsequently from that, that's where we had suddenly this explosive growth within that. So you got to really pay attention to where the innovative moments come from, because they're not always where you think they're going to come from.
Yeah, I think that's just an excellent example. One of the things that the research shows is that for products like this, and one thing that I think is interesting is that the research has demonstrated that pre-commitments from customers is really critical. Yeah. If I can't prove to you how big this thing is going to get, and I'm not really sure what the value proposition is, right? Because we think Post-it notes is this, but it turns out it's that. Let me at least get one customer who agrees to work with me, and then I can start learning from them what this product really is. But I think one of the interesting things that we're learning through research is this notion of experimentation and prototyping really rapidly.
Absolutely.
Saying, instead of doing all the stuff that we as business people are trained to do and doing all the secondary market research and even doing focus groups and talking to our customers, it's about, forget all that. When you're talking about something that's really new, we're bound to be wrong about everything we think at the outset. So let's just figure out how we take our initial, intuitions, come up with a prototype, put it in front of customers, see what they do with it.
Yeah.
Because it turns out in many cases it's very different from what we thought it was going to be. And then you just keep feeding that back into the process.
Well, and I love and you see this, I'm sure, with the entrepreneurs that you work with. You know, we think a lot of times, especially a company like mine, we think a lot of times of innovation from a technology perspective. But I was reading a business case on an innovative approach to how to launch a product. And this was Guitar Hero 2. So for those of you who do any gaming or have relatives who do gaming, this was a product that was coming out, and they really wanted to make a splash launch. And GameStop was the company that was going to do the primary launch through this. And they realized they had a limited budget in terms of what they were able to do. What they were able to do is they identified there was these 16 bloggers in the gaming industry that really were influencers. And they determined those 16 bloggers actually affect 4.2 million gamers. They have the ability to really understand how they develop their interests. And they sent out pre-releases to the bloggers. And they said, this is not on the market. We want you to evaluate this. And the blogger said, can we talk about it? And we said, absolutely. And so they blogged about it. And by the time they launched it, on the weekend of launch, it was the single largest launch of a game in history from that. And it was all viral. It was all viral media. They did no advertising for it. They just literally let these opinion leader bloggers take that game and run with it with their opinions. I thought to myself, what an amazingly innovative approach to taking a product to market.
In fact, that raises a really, I think, interesting question. How is social media changing the process of innovating, you know, at 3M?
Oh, it's amazing. It's incredible. I mean, when have you ever had the opportunity to really dialogue with customers? And I'll tell you an interesting story, because it was echoed to me a while ago. 50 years ago, we had a debate in 3M on whether or not we should put telephones on all the employees' desks, okay? And the fear was, well, if we do, they could talk to people, you know? And how unproductive would that be? So a lot of companies, especially larger companies, are really struggling with social media. Do I let my employees talk about this thing? Because God forbid it's in writing now, you know, and the legal trail and all the issues that follow that. You know, my perspective on this thing, and I think you're starting to see our company and other big companies saying, we lose if we don't talk to people. We lose if our employees aren't engaged. Every company is driven by its employees. Our employees are our greatest brand ambassadors. If they're not out actively talking about our company, we're holding back, we lose. So I think it not only is a great way for us to communicate, it's a great way to get two-way dialogue, sure, which every company has to have.
What do you think are the biggest challenges of doing that? Because obviously it's really hard for companies to let that much control go, you know, sometimes.
Oh, exquisite fear.
Yeah. I
mean, just terrifying, you know, grab your heart type of fear. And it's generally driven by our very, very gifted, very good legal team who has... So I asked, in my capacity, I asked our legal team, I said, I need our legal document in terms of what we can guide our employees to do, and they came back with a 28-page document. And I said, congratulations, you've killed social media in our company. So we got it down to one page. We took a page out of Best Buy's playbook. They got a one-page document, we got a one-page document. And it's really giving permission, and it starts from tone at the top. If you have senior executives participating in social media, starting with internal blogs, starting with internal, you know, communication capabilities with their employers, telling them what's on their mind. A lot of people think that it takes a lot of time. It should be part of what you do. It shouldn't be an addition to what you do. It's a great communication tool, and I think we have to just understand it. We have to also recognize half of the world's population is under 30. This is what they do. You know, I read data that says the average 25-year-old is in contact with 100 people a day, of which only 10% they see in person. All right? So as my kids like to tell me, you know, just come on, get with it.
Right, right. Okay, so, well, and you raise another issue, which I think is important. You said fear. You know, a lot of research shows that most CEOs think the reason why their companies don't innovate is because their companies are risk averse. And clearly when you're innovating, you know, failure is a byproduct of that. That happens, right? If you're trying to do something that has never been done before, bring some radically new thinking to the marketplace, then some of those efforts are going to fail, right? Because there's just not the data, there's just not the track record. And if you don't fail, then you're not really probably pushing the edge, right? And really trying radical things. So how do you manage fear of failure at 3M? Because we talk about it, we say we got to get better at allowing failure to happen, but most people still feel, I don't want to fail, you know? I mean, I want to succeed. And
yeah, that's the single biggest challenge, I think. And I think potentially the biggest concern every company should have. You know, we're a publicly traded company, and we're measured quarterly. And I've had one executive one time describe to me the best 5-year plan was 20 good quarters. So it's hard to get out of that short-term mentality when, you know, that's kind of your mindset. But I think more succinctly to your question, and I'd love to hear your answer on this too, because you work with a lot of entrepreneurs. The ability to pallet risk is a struggle for every company. Our particular company, what we like to do is we always try to carve out money that we can use as a new venture component within this. And as of late, we've been investing in companies that are doing some cutting edge things where we'll invest in companies and take a small percentage share of the company. So it's very similar to what you see in a lot of venture funds. And we believe that's a great avenue for us to be able to do this. Seed money into, you know, entities that we're not involved with, that others are involved with. That's a way for us to mitigate the risk is, you know, in our line businesses, you got to hit your P&Ls. So what we do is we try to incubate things outside of that to keep them focused on what they need to do and not having to worry about the balance. It's very hard to operate quarterly and then also think long term. But you deal with entrepreneurs all the time. Yeah. What's your thought?
And I think what's interesting is that startup entrepreneurs have a process that we're increasingly starting to recognize could be important and valuable to corporations. And we call it bootstrapping with startup entrepreneurs. But what we're recognizing in the corporate setting is that what we have to get better at doing is figuring out how you create sort of small scale experiments, you know, rather than the sort of typical stage gate process that can end up putting lots of money, millions of dollars and many, you know, months or years into product development and end up with a failure. It's about taking really small staged investments and saying, okay, at this stage, what are the most critical sources of uncertainty? You know, or what are the most critical assumptions we're making and how can we test that quickly and cheaply? So it's this notion of prototyping, rapid experimentation, getting some learning, feeding that back into the evolution of the product. It's the Post-it note story.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's doing that with all, you know, I mean, for those things that are clearly, you know, just an extension of our existing core business where we have a lot of data, where we know the customers, we know the technologies, we can sort of follow our more traditional approaches. But when we're talking about something that's really new, let's do what your guys did, you know, with the Post-it notes. Let's just say we don't know it. Let's not pretend we know it. But let's say, what are the critical assumptions? How can I test that real quick? Even if it's just handing them out to every, you know, administrative assistant in the building. How are they them watching them? Ah, it turns out they're not using it the way we thought they were. Oh my gosh, they're using it in a totally different way. And suddenly we have some new insights about who the customer is, what the value proposition is, but doing that in a way that's cheap and fast. You know, so, and that's very much sort of what's been called the design thinking sort of approach, which you guys I know are very engaged in, you know, but so that's one of the things that we're definitely seeing companies starting to get better at, but still is a challenge, you know, it's a challenge. So.
Well, I mean, I love the notion of failure as one more attempt that I made.
Yeah.
And I think that to a large degree, the risk portion from an employee's perspective in a company is, you recognize my career is tied to my successes, not necessarily tied to my failures.
Sure.
And so it makes inherently people risk adverse in that regard. So I think what we try to do is make sure we're spreading the component around. So it's not really at an individual level, but we make it more across there. And it lessens the burden, if you will, on the individual to really want to push that. So I think that helps from a cultural perspective. I think another interesting dynamic with risk-taking in general, especially in large companies, is the notion that everything has to be some type of a blockbuster. We have huge amounts of successes with just small things. And I would say at the end of the day, you have to celebrate like crazy more the things you tried that didn't work than the things you tried and did work.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's a really important learning. We talk about culture and how creating a culture that attracts the kind of people you described earlier, that allows people to fail, what we call smart mistakes, fail early, right? Fail early, fail often to learn, right? So it's about smart mistakes, not huge, costly mistakes that have taken millions of dollars to get to. But we talk about the importance of going beyond just saying failures are inevitable, but actually celebrating and saying, what did we learn from that? Let's figure out how we spread the word about this one. You know, here are the heroes of the day because they tried this, it didn't work, but here's what they learned and here's what they did differently. You know, that still builds capabilities, that still builds knowledge.
Oh, absolutely,
right?
Yeah.
You know, so I think a lot of companies have a hard time doing that, celebrating the failures. And I think your point all along, tone from the top, it has to come from senior management.
It does. And, you know, celebrations don't have to be elaborate. You know, what's very interesting a lot of times is, I found it interesting as we work around the world. You know, we had a project we were working in Japan, and it didn't work out the way we wanted to, so we decided to do a celebration within this. And the way we celebrated, while I was appreciated that we were going to recognize that we tried within this, was not culturally something that they were accustomed to, not celebrating a failure, but the methodology in which we celebrated. So I think it's very important as you do these recognitions, it has to be something that's personally appropriate for each individual.
Sure.
So one of the things we always try to do with employees is recognize, you know, how do you like to be recognized? Because I could actually do more harm by recognizing you in a fashion you're not comfortable with. Some people absolutely don't want to be pulled up in front and have, you know, get the pat on the back and say, look at Bob here, he was great. You know, they're mortified in that. So I've actually done more damage than good within that person, as opposed to just go into Bob's office and say, you know, that was phenomenal what you did, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate that. And Bob thinks that's very enriching.
And I think that's one of the interesting things. We always think it's about money, you know, it's about bonus and my compensation, but people really respond to the boss saying, I noticed what you did.
Yeah.
And I noticed what happened, and here's what I thought you did was smart, and thank you for doing the following. You know, I mean, that really resonates. Sometimes it's the simplest things, you know, and that seems like that would be so obvious, but people really
Well,
respond
not to put
that.
pressure on bosses, but people really don't leave companies. They leave bosses, if you think about it.
Yeah.
It's the fact I'm not connected with my boss anymore, and the boss is not connected with me.
So how do you, as your report, you know...
I got some direct reports in the room here, by
Yeah.
the way, so.
And Laura works for me, so I'm a
There you
little
go.
worried when you're talking about this stuff. So.
So how do you, as your, you know, as the people that report to you get more and more numerous than the people that report to them, I mean, how do you keep that personal, and as people are distributed around the world, if that's so important, those relationships, how do you keep them really alive and personal?
Well, I mean, you have to allow people the room to fail on their own terms. You know, give them creative license. Let them operate in an atmosphere that they feel like, hey, I could try some stuff. I can push the envelope a little bit. And I know I've got air cover in that regard. Lots of communication, lots of dialogue in terms of, okay, this wasn't working. What did we learn? You know, the postmortem. I think you're doing this. You know, to fail and repeat is the penultimate failure. To fail and learn is actually a success.
Right. So,
Let me ask you guys, and please fill out a card, send it in the middle, and we'll see if we can get it. We've talked about what happens when people are innovative. Can you, or how do you, teach people to be innovators? You're talking about the result of them being failures or innovators or whatever you want to call them.
Yeah.
What do you do to get them started? Because I don't believe we teach many classes or, you know, do a lot of things to encourage people to be innovators. How do you do that?
Well, I mean, I believe it has to start with the atmosphere they're engaged in. That's partially built on the culture. It's partly built on their surroundings, their physical space and other components within that. It's vital that you give them the opportunity to operate in a space that they feel like they can really be creative, they can really push. And it comes down to your boss, and I hate to keep harping on this, but I really, really mean this. It's, you know, if your boss is giving you license to push in these things, you know, you're going to respond, and I think you're going to act in a fashion that's going to allow this. And lastly, in our case, you know, it's about understanding who can I go to when I have questions, and it's all over the company within that. And what we usually find is somebody has an idea that they believe is kind of baked, but then somebody else gives them something else and it really leapfrogs the opportunity. And so I think you have to have that kind of environment too.
and I am a firm believer that anybody can become more creative. We are all creative people. There's this wonderful piece of research from the 60s, actually. There was a guy named George Lands who worked for NASA, and he had developed an instrument for them that was meant to help them identify highly creative scientists, people who would be real contributors so they could be developed further. And so he used it for a number of years. It was very effective. And he decided to try it on kids. And he went into some schools, and he went into some kindergartners. And he gave them the test. And the percentage of students who were tested and were found to be highly or very creative, 98%. He went back and he tested them in 6th grade, I believe, in middle school. 60%. He went back and tested them right before high school, 30%. He went and did this at he did like 300,000, random sample of adults, 2%, right? So his conclusion, non-creative behavior is learned. We are creative, right? So it's in there, it's within us, and we've learned because of a lot of things, because of fear, because of habits, because of all those people who love us and tell us to conform and to know the right one answer. But if you have the right tools, and if you have the right environment,
Sure.
I think anybody can surprise themselves with the breathtakingly fresh thinking they can bring to problems and the terrific creative problem solving. So I have to believe that. I teach, but I see it every day, with my students and people that say, I'm not a creative person. And yet, who with the right tools and in a collaborative group where everybody's really throwing themselves into it and allowing themselves to try things and maybe fail, they can come up with tremendously different insights than they ever expected they would get, and tremendously good solutions. So I see it all the time. I am a big believer. We are all creative and can be retrained to recapture that.
Well, I think, Mark, to add on that, I love that. You'd be amazed what you can do if someone in authority gives you permission.
Yeah. I think that's really right. And I think certainly research has shown that companies take a big leap forward in terms of their ability to innovate when they're just told they have to. When senior management says we demand innovation, you are now going to be evaluated, and rewarded based on your ability to generate insights about our customers, populate a pipeline with really good ideas, get some new things through and out to customers, pretty quickly, right? So, the first step is for senior management to say, we really mean it, it's really important, and to really walk the talk, too, right? And help build all the institutional mechanisms that are necessary to really make that real and authentic to people. So, but I guess we should allow people to ask questions. I guess.
I have a number of questions, and just to just to tell all of you, if you submit a question, we don't get to it today, we are going to put them up on the website, and have Laura and Jeff will be responding to one of those. I got one question. Maybe we'll just kind of take a detour on this one. Somebody asked, Jeff, who bought that shirt for you?
My wife's in the audience. I suspect it may have come from...
She didn't think I was going to read that when she put it in. Okay, so...
You write it.
And it's looking good.
Do you like it? Do you buy it?
All right.
Awesome.
So what's been your personal favorite innovation in the past 5 or 10 years? Inside, outside of 3M, just kind of what kind of innovation has grabbed you in the last few years?
iPad.
Ooh.
It's a game changer. I was a total PC guy until I got an iPad. I can't even spell PC anymore.
Yeah. Well, I love and adore my iPad, but my absolutely favorite innovation is the Roomba. Are you all familiar with Roomba?
Yeah.
Oh.
That's the little motorized vacuum cleaner. I tell everybody in my family it's the most productive member of our family, because wherever we are, that Roomba is cleaning a room someplace. I have 3 cats, 3 kids. So we are always descending into dirt and dustballism. And Roomba is there to save our lives. I absolutely love and adore Roomba. What a great, I even have the floor washing one for my kitchen. It's not terrible.
But, one of the things we would strive for when we're doing product development is not necessarily what does this product do to solve somebody's needs, but more critically, what does this product do that creates an atmosphere where you can't imagine your life without it?
Here's another interesting question I thought. How does 3M think about designing new products for customers, at the bottom of the pyramid? I know you're global and
Sure.
sort of the emerging economies. How do you think about new innovative products for that market?
Well, first of all, there's a misperception that it's all about price, and it's not. There's value propositions up and down the pyramid, and generally, when we refer to a pyramid, it's more of it's a broad-based but lower-cost product mixed within there. It comes down to what is the fundamental problem we're trying to solve. When I was I used to run our dental business, and we had a really elegant solution for how people in emerging markets were addressing the need to have a crown. For instance, they lost a tooth, and for those of you who've gone through that fantastic procedure, it's time consuming. There's a couple of steps involved. There's a lot of manpower involved. It gets expensive over time. We developed actually a preformed material that's tooth colored, that's in a somewhat malleable shape, that you could literally, in the same appointment, you could put this in the tooth, you could trim it, you could do some customization in the mouth, you allow it to cure, and the patient's gone, they have a new tooth within this. So I always thought that was not necessarily a great product for the top of the market. I always thought it was for down pyramid within this, because now look at all the steps I've taken out of the process. Look at all the cost I've taken out of the process. So I think if you really try to figure out, what am I trying to solve? What's the problem we're trying to tackle here? There's huge opportunities, whether it's at the top of the pyramid or the bottom of the pyramid, if you're focused in on what's the problem. And in our case, it was cost, and the cost wasn't solely related to the cost of the product, it was the cost of the process.
I think that's a really fascinating area. People have termed it reverse innovation, looking at the developing world and the fact that by necessity they've had to come up with products and services that strip out a lot of the excess in order to be affordable, in order to be deliverable with the infrastructure there. And many companies, particularly in healthcare, are interestingly starting to look, at places like India, China, and saying, how can we get some real inspiration? We live in the developed world, and in this country, healthcare costs are a real crisis, right? And so we have learned, or many people are starting to learn, why we can get some real inspiration by looking at how people do it when they have fewer resources. A great example is GE went into, I think it was India, and some technologists there developed a portable ultrasound and electrocardiograph machines, because there just wasn't this infrastructure. There weren't these big hospitals. They wanted to get out into rural areas. They had to come up with something that was smaller, that a doctor who was mobile could take around and use. And they've discovered that that has got some fantastic potential here, and that they're actually getting ready to launch a slightly upgraded version. But the design has been totally changed because it was just stripped down from the beginning, disruptive innovation, disruptive technology. Absolutely. So I think it's a real fascinating thing that companies are starting to learn. We actually can get inspiration from the bottom of the pyramid.
Yeah, without doubt.
In terms of how to strip out some of these steps in this process and develop products that actually work, in our economy here. So I think that's quite an interesting sort of trend.
When you come out with an innovation, can you be too early? Can a company be too early?
Yes. Anybody ever heard of a product called Swiffer?
Yes.
Okay, we made that 10 years too early, and it kind of went a little bit for us, but P&G really grabbed hold of it and really has exploded it. To their credit, magnificent company in terms of ethnographic understanding of customer needs. We missed the market, they didn't.
Any idea why?
Well, they're really good, number one.
Well, yes, they are.
But I think we just misread we were too early in the trend in terms of the time limitations. So one of the value propositions Swiffer does is it's a very elegant, very time-consuming solution to how you remove lint and particles and things from your floors or other surfaces within that. And we were ahead of the curve in that regard. We didn't, frankly understand. We looked at it in terms of one application. They've blown it out into multiple applications. You can use it, on the floor. You can use it on the ceiling. You can use it on the walls. I mean, it's just brilliant. And I think to their credit, they really capitalized on that.
One of the things we talk about are innovation ecosystems, and recognizing when you bring something to market, what are sort of the supporting elements of infrastructure or customer behavior that doesn't exist yet that has to be there. And thinking about, sometimes you're just too early, but there's also other times you can start being proactive and saying, even though this is not our job, some of these other things, we have to start getting much more proactive about making some of that stuff happen. Picking partners or acquiring other businesses to start building that infrastructure, to start creating the opportunity to sell something. But that's obviously very challenging. So
we're getting close to the time. I think I'll turn it back to each of you and just sort of a concluding comment around what you've been thinking about tonight, as well as what you've been thinking about for the last 20 years in terms of innovation. You got a minute. Go.
Well. I think, first of all, my compliments to the University of St. Thomas for this forum. I think it's really great, and I think it's great to have exchanges like this. As we look forward as a company, we have to be more collaborative, not only within our walls, but outside of our walls. I think some of the world's biggest challenges have elegant solutions if you just put the right people together. I think the answers to our problems are out there. It's just finding the right people to match up on these opportunities. We have a company, as a company, we've got massive technologies. We're very proud of it. We've got 46 technology platforms. But what we miss sometimes is how to utilize those platforms through someone else's eyes. And I think that's really the inspired innovation moving forward, is where we can really get truly social. We can truly get collaborative in a global environment. And it's not limited by the boundaries of your intellectual property structure, by your 4 physical walls. It's really inspired by people just seeing ideas and being able to run with them.
I think, you know, we face a lot of challenges in our world today, not just companies, you know, but a lot of social problems, a lot of, you know, issues with regard to inequality around education and, you know, poverty. All of us are capable of being innovators. All of us are capable of being change makers, whether that's within an organization or outside. So I think, I guess my final thoughts would be, all of us can develop these kinds of capabilities and can learn the tools. As managers, I really encourage people to make sure they develop a really broad repertoire of experiences if you want to be an innovator. Don't just follow a very narrow path. You know, if you're an engineer, you know, get some general management experience. Wherever you are in the organization, try and work on a new venture, whether it's destined to succeed or fail. You'll learn a tremendous amount from that experience. And don't be afraid to try. Find other people in your organization and outside your organization who have interesting ideas, who want to try new things, who want to be innovators as well. So I guess that's my final word.
Okay, I'm going to attempt to reinvigorate my ability to say large words. I've been practicing for like an hour right now, right? And my last sort of thought that I have here was innovation is about creating cultures for curious, colorful, creative, and collaborative people. All right, so I thank all of you for coming. I thank our panelists for this evening, and we will be posting some answers to the other questions on the Intersections website for the College of Business. So keep coming back, and then you'll also find out when our next event is as well. So thank you for coming.
Yeah, thank you. I really enjoyed it. I really liked it.
A lot of fun.
We have to get you to come into the classroom.